Hello, I'm Corey Newton. I apologize for being so long-winded and trying to read about 10 minutes worth of material in about 2. So let's just continue where we left off. We're talking about BRICS banks and a new world reserve currency. So let's try and pick up right about where we left off. Okay, we're talking about reserve currency, we're talking about the BRICS, and we're going to get into more multipolar regional realignment based on currency and strategy. Now, let's pick up right here. And while no one can say yet whether the BRICS initiatives will succeed, they represent a major challenge to Bretton Woods institutions, which should respond, rethinking the role of the U.S. dollar in the international monetary system is case in point. Rock out down here. We briefly touch on SDRs and we'll get into them again. The simplest way to fulfill this vision would be allocate SDRs as a full reserve asset, which countries could either use to deposit in their IMF accounts. The IMF would use these deposits to finance lending operations rather than having to rely on quota allocations or arrangements to borrow from members. Other provisions could be added to address developing countries' high currency demands while enhancing their role in the creation of international money. A formula could be created to give them a larger share of SDR allocations than they now receive. That's important. Now, we'll go back to what SDR is, just so we don't lose everybody. It's a currency basket of the euro, the yen, the pound, and the dollar. Now, they specifically said they wanted to keep it as a reserve currency. Now, if all the banks are printing, if Yellen at the Federal Reserve is easing, if Abenomics in Japan is easing, if Mario Draghi is easing, how much money can they put out? They need SDRs as reserves to, instead of meeting it in yen, euros, and dollars, they're going to meet that reserve in SDRs, and that's going to free up the money they have in dollars, yen, and euros to push out into the system, so it's more easy. Why would Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South America partake in that system while all they're going to be doing is propping up the collapsing international order that's been established as collapsing because of ease too much? It's not going to happen. That's why they set up the new development bank that we have in the other article. So it's not going to happen. The private use of SDRs could be encouraged, but that would likely be met with strong opposition from countries currently using international reserve currency, especially the U.S. Keeping SDRs as a pure central bank money would eliminate such opposition. So it's central bank money, just like I just said. So the Fed is maxed out. So are they going to draw down reserves? No, they'll get SDRs, and then they can let out the rest of it. It's unbelievable what they're doing. It's completely unrealistic. And look at the end. Just as the Bretton Woods framework restored order to the global economy after World War II, a new monetary framework underpinned by a truly international currency could strengthen much-needed economic and financial stability. That is insane. That does not work realistically, because the BRICS aren't going to finance the ability of the G7 to continue printing money. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So let's go back to the BRICS article. Lastly, now we just talked about how it's in the other article it may not work with the IMF and the world international order needs to respond. Let's see what this paragraph said. Lastly, while a new development bank by the BRICS does not yet pose a direct challenge to existing Bretton Woods counterparts, IMF, World Bank, its creation will generate competition among global financial institutions. Creation of a new development bank comes at a time when developing countries no longer have faith in the current system and are seeking to promote and safeguard their economic interests. To that end, establishing regional monetary funds can be more effective than the current system when it comes to representation, coordination, and crisis management. And that's what I'm talking about in here. Regional currencies, multipolar regional realignment through the BRICS, through our own necessity to wind down our debt, to wind down our social insurance program, and be able to compete, because this new development bank is already in action in South America, in Latin America. Here's a story from yesterday or today, or maybe 2 days ago, India seeks to boost trade relations with Latin America. They just set up a new development bank. Here we go. September 11th. We will negotiate free trade agreements with countries which we feel India has a strong exporting interest. Latin America, Africa, West Asia. What have they put? India has put, from 2001 they had $2.6 billion to $42 billion in investment in Latin America in 2013. And it could reach $100 billion in the next 4 years. So there you go. So India is already investing because they have 1 billion people. They all are going to want cell phones. They're all going to want TVs. Or want flat screens. They're going to want everything that we want here, the consumers. So as they grow, they need those resources. They don't have them in India, so they have to get them from somewhere else. And so they're investing in Latin America and having them. What do we do with Latin America? We give them aid. We give them IMF loans so they can invest in equipment that they have to buy from us. So they are a perpetual debt cycle. Here, the BRICS model, they're actually putting money in and developing and not just giving them aid so they can't function for themselves and become dependent on us. They're giving them money to invest in and be independent and get that, mutual benefit. Here we go. Here's China. Latin America is set to play a bigger role for Chinese firms. Who could imagine that? The deep engagements are based on the profound belief that there exists a win-win situation with Latin America and the Caribbean. Though the engagements offer rich natural resources, they also provide a mature market with growing middle-class populations that play a major role in the world economy. So how much are they looking at? Chinese government has set an investment target of $250 billion in Latin America in the next 10 years, from $80 billion at the end of 2013. So what are they doing? They are already developing this multipolar system. It's already going on in the currencies. They don't want a part of the SDRs. So we just saw in those articles, okay, we need to increase SDRs that are baskets of US dollars, sterling, pound, yen, and euro, so they can ease more out of their central bank and replace the reserves with SDRs. Why would they finance that? So we have India in the game, we have China in the game. Look who else is in the game. Oh, the Russians. Euro and America just put a bunch of sanctions on the Russians, and where are they going? They're going to South America now. It's amazing how this stuff works. In particular, the company is invested in Brazilian field where exploration is underway. However, the precise identity of the field remains unknown. The company will start gas production in Bolivia in 2016. Latin America is rich in hydrocarbons, which interest Gazprom. Gazprom International, a subsidiary engaged in international projects, will undertake gas production, said Ivan. According to Kapanov, the solution makes it possible for Gazprom to diversify its resource base and expand its presence in a region that is highly attractive in terms of demand. So now, right now we have an Ebola crisis outbreak in Africa. So everybody's not moving their money to Africa now, around South Africa, who's a part of the BRICS. They're moving it in South America with Brazil. So it's all going to be circulating out of Brazil into the rest of it. This is a development strategy. It's a growth strategy, and it's an export growth strategy. This story I couldn't believe. So it gets into a little bit of Islamic State problems in China, but the real meat and potatoes of this article are about 2 Silk Roads that China is trying to develop. 2 Silk Roads. One Silk Road is a link to the resource-rich Middle East. One is the traditional sea lane, which runs through the Indian Ocean, South China Sea and East China Sea, and which has been rebaptized by President Xi as a maritime Silk Road. The other, less noticed, consists of building a new supply route overland through Central Asia and into the Middle East. So China's going there by sea and by land, and this brings it home to the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. If you hadn't heard of that, get this, get on the internet. Shanghai, so you're talking BRICS, you're talking Shanghai Cooperation Organization, multipolar realignment, regional realignment, economically, militarily, and politically is what is happening. Now, Russia's Shanghai Cooperation Organization, guess who's going to be the president of that for next year? The Russians are. So you kick the Russians out of the G8, because, oh, they're so bad. Now they're the president of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, all the countries involved in that. We need to be very careful about what we're doing here. And right now, the United States is not. So you're talking pipelines. You just cut the deal between the Russians and Chinese natural gas. Now you're having trilateral things going on between the Mongolians, the Russians, and the Chinese. The natural geography proximity of Mongolia, Russia, and China makes it possible for us to implement good long-term projects in infrastructure, the power sector, and the mining industry. We have what to discuss with each other. Naturally, we deem it important, expedient, and usually start a permanent dialogue. Amazing. Increasing cooperation with China and Russia, particularly in the areas of infrastructure, mining, and energy, can only help Mongolia help it continue to become a more visible player in Asian diplomacy. So we have the BRICS, we have the Shanghai Cooperation Organization that I both specifically identify in this book as a root of the multipolar regional realignment. And what's the United States doing? How come we're not investing anywhere? Because we have to pay back interest and principal on $17 trillion in debt. We have to pay back hundreds of billions and trillions of dollars on social insurance. So we need to get those things under control. Okay? We're in a situation now where we have to pay back all this debt and all this stuff about social insurance, and the rules of the game make it so it's more restrictive for us to pay it back. We're not expanding the production possibilities frontier. We're redividing it, redistributing it instead of growing it. It's very troublesome and problematic because we have huge energy resources in the United States. We have huge energy resources with our allies in Canada. And we need to be competitive in these areas. Instead of giving them IMF loans that they have to buy our stuff and pay them back, we need to be investing in there, and we can't do it. And the good thing is we have a window of time. We have about 5 years before all this stuff that the BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization are doing to come to fruition. And if we can get our house in order in that same 5-year time period, we can be competitive in Latin America. We can be competitive in Africa. And instead of trying to go ahead and overextend ourselves in the Middle East fighting a sectarian civil war, we need to recognize this regional realignment, and we can all have partnerships with the Russians, the Indians, the Chinese, and shutting us down because they're building roads in the Middle East. They don't want them blown up. Okay, we can do it in a regional, multipolar, realigned context instead of enforcing this IMF that's crumbling, this World Bank that's crumbling, this whole NATO operation is crumbling. I mean, it's almost to the point where we're like the old world with old Europe, and this is like the new developing areas. And we need to get with the program and get our stuff under control so we can maximize our independence, our sovereignty, our security, and our survival in the context of our political, military, and economic independence. And we need significant changes in the rules of the game to pull this off. Because the way the status quo is going now, with two-party idiocracy, the Democrats and the Republicans, they're only concerned about raising money. That's all they're concerned about, is raising money, staying in power, and getting reelected, and staying in control. They're not concerned about leadership. They're not concerned about taking risks to benefit the people of the United States. They're not. Otherwise, we would have a whole different set of policies than what we have. So kind of to wrap this all up before I run out of time again and call it a night, we need to really scale back on our social insurance programs in accordance with the 10th Amendment. I'm not saying to eliminate them, but let people opt out and delegate it to the states where it belongs. That's number one. Number two, we really need to think about getting our debt under control, paying it all off, and eventually we're going to have a currency anchored to gold if we're going to compete with the BRICS, with the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. And we really need to find a strategy to disengage from the Middle East, and that's developing our energy resources. We don't need to be there. If they all want to have a sectarian civil war and kill each other, we need to sell each side weapons and let them speed it up. So thanks again. I'm Corey Newton. When you get a chance, pick this up on Amazon. Have a great weekend.